Hey chums, this is Spiffy, and welcome back to Art Redux. So, I'm going to speed up this footage more than I ever have before. I started with 4 times speed, then I moved up to 6 times speed. Now we're going to move it up to 16 times speed. Because I'm still kind of experimenting and I want to see how this feels if we speed it up much faster. Now, of course, this probably means we're going to finish the entire piece by the end of the episode, so yay for that. So, hopefully this episode ends up being much more lively, because you're going to be able to see progress happening by the second. Yeah, and I like how this blue shade turned out. You know, I kind of just picked it at random, but it looks really good. And something that helps it all fit together is, of course, the lighting. Because even if the colors are picked at random, they all look like they're part of the same scene. Yeah! Now, something that you may notice about the way that I color these is, you know, I get the outlines first, and that's a good way to go about coloring things if you're coloring them by hand, because basically, once you've gotten that outline, you know, needs to be clean. The border between it and the other colors needs to be clean. But once you've gotten that outline, then you don't necessarily have to be as careful, because you can go over that part that you've already colored, and it's not going to mess things up. But if you just start scribbling and you go outside the lines, then that's going to look bad. But I guess that's just basic, you know, art stuff. That's just how you color things. That and making sure to round off my coloring motions so that it's ovals rather than back and forth lines. I've always been kind of lazy about shoes and feet. I've never been good at drawing feet. Feet are the hardest thing for me. And I hate drawing shoes, so I almost never draw characters with shoelaces. And as you see here, I felt like the lighting wasn't showing enough, so I increased the layer and cleaned up the line art so that we've just got this this part of the line art visible here. Now, I don't think she should be in a white void, so I thought, why not give her a background that matches the lighting? And that points out the fact that I didn't color in the whites. And the fact that there's this border between where I colored in manually and where I used the fill bucket. Oh, now right here, I'm making a pretty big mistake using the smudge tool, because look at what that did. I tried to use the smudge tool to try and fix some of the border, but the smudge tool ended up making that really gross, so I had to just delete the whole thing and fill it again anyway. Now, I suppose that this salmon color isn't the best background for this, so let's try something else. Let's try more of a purple. Yeah, that complements everything a lot better than just the exact same color I used for the lighting. Now, I want to start moving on to the outlines. At first I was thinking maybe colored outlines, but I don't know how that'll look. So I decided to just shift to black outlines. And now that I found a nice pen, then I'm moving on to that. And now we're gonna ink the entire thing. Now, I love inking. I think it's one of my favorite parts, because I've always been a huge fan of clean lines. That's why when I draw in pencil, I use mechanical pencil rather than regular pencil, because I've never been a big fan of shading with pencil. I like being able to have this nice clean line. It's just so great, because I can just define that shape using the lines. It's weird though, because we don't have outlines in real life, but you know, everyone seems to understand what you're doing when you draw outlines. Now, if you noticed earlier, I tilted the screen. You know, for a while I didn't know I could do that, but I actually learned if you hold down R, you can rotate the canvas, which is a great tool especially when drawing lines, because, you know, some curves feel better for my hand to do at certain angles than others. So sometimes if I want to get a certain curve, then I need to tilt the canvas. And if I'm doing it on paper, then I can just tilt the paper, but digitally it's always been frustrating to not be able to do that. But now I can. Now some of you might be wondering if I'm using a tablet. Yes, I am. I'm using a $50 tablet from 5 years ago. I got as a Christmas gift from my grandparents. It's very basic, but it gets the job done. I would love to get a tablet like a really nice Wacom tablet, or Wacom, I don't know, that has a screen on it. But as it is right now, I'm being able to make do with a tablet that doesn't have a screen on it. It's a little weird because the scale and position of what I'm drawing doesn't match my hand motions, but it's definitely a lot easier than trying to draw with a mouse. For sure. Now, if you look at when I draw these lines, at the very end of them, I do a little thing, dot dot dot, and that's you know, a good way to, without changing the line width, sort of give a bit of a almost a gradient at the end of the line. Now, I don't want to do that at the end of every line that I make, but any line where it's supposed to be like the same object and it's kind of fading into itself, I like to add those dots. And I guess that's a trick that I learned by watching Ross O'Donovan doing his Pokemon Art Academy videos on Steam Train. If you haven't heard of Steam Train, check out the Game Grumps. They're super awesome, and you've probably heard of them. Now, of course, Ross is definitely not the person to coin this technique, but, you know, I just learned about it from him, and I really like the way it looks, especially on the folds in the shirt. Now, one of the great things about adding these dark outlines is it gets rid of these gross borders between these colors, because as you can see, you know, it's kind of pale in some places or dark in others, but these outlines cover up those weird border portions, and that was sort of the plan to begin with, was to do all the colors first and then add the outlines, because I mean, when you're doing work in markers, that's definitely the way you want to do it. You want to start with the lightest color and work your way towards the darkest color, because the dark color is not as likely to pick up light colors when you go over them, but light colors, like, imagine drawing the outlines first and then adding yellow. It always will smear, and the pale color will pick up the darker color, and it just looks terrible. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to what I'm doing because this is a digital piece, but, you know, I'm trying to emulate markers as much as possible. Alright, now I just gotta do the tail, and that's it. So, one thing I can definitely say about this whole speeding up 16 times, it definitely makes it so that the commentary has to be much more about what I'm doing, because more is happening. It doesn't really give me much time to diverge from the subject of art, which is possibly a good thing. I was thinking when I initially started this series that the commentary, while of course acknowledging the art that's being made, would still focus more on what I wanted to talk about at any given time. And now that I've done a few episodes, I think I want to make it more about the art, and if I have something specific I want to talk about, maybe I can put it over footage of a calm video game, or maybe make a typographic animation. Now, if any of you thought that I was done with the line art, you are dead wrong. See, whenever I do line art, unless I'm doing really thin lines, I like to change the line width based on how far apart the object and the objects behind it or the background behind it are. So of course that means, you know, around the border of the character should be the thickest outline, and then if there are any like body parts that are overlapping that are a bit more ahead than the other body parts, make those lines a little bit thicker. The way that I see it, any lines that are inside of an object, like wrinkles and corners, those lines, as they get thicker, they expand from the middle of the line. But any outlines, as they get thicker, they would expand from the edge of the object out into the background space. Because if you don't do that, then then you get these nasty, like, the edges of the hair being all, like, almost entirely black, and you just lose the entire form that way. And I gotta say, you know, the amount of difference that some smart line work can make, you know, is incredible in my book. So now that I've finished the outer outline, now I'm adding just a little bit of thickness to all the little overlapping bits to make it clear that, you know, this isn't flat. This is a three-dimensional space, you know, and that these objects have distance between them. Because, you know, we're working in 2D. I feel like doing that with the outlines always helps to give a sense of the depth of a scene. And now, with these last finishing touches, I am done with this character. Now, I was initially going to erase these pencil outlines, but actually it adds to the whole piece, so I'm just going to leave them there, because this looks great as it is, or so one would think. Unfortunately, I am the type of person who spends way too much time on things that I don't need to, so I'm going to spend the rest of this episode adding a background. And that being said, you know, it definitely needed it. Just the flat color background was, well, it didn't quite look finished. Although, I think I took a little bit too much time to put into this background. I didn't want to take a ton of time and try and, you know, draw a whole scene in the background. But considering the fact that, you know, it's just basically kind of a gradient cloud thingy, I think I spent a bit too much time on it. Overall, it was, I think, nearly 58 minutes spent just on the background cloud thing. So I decided to speed up this last portion to 24 times speed, so in case you haven't been able to tell that it's been going a little bit faster. Now, this doesn't really end up looking much like markers at this point. If anything, it almost looks kind of like watercolor. But I think it goes well with the whole picture. Now, basically, what I'm doing for this is I am essentially, aside from, you know, a bunch of like little tweaks here and there to try and get it to look precisely how I want it to, I'm essentially just taking one deep blue and one kind of orangish reddish color and putting it at very low opacity and just like drawing a layer and then drawing another layer and then drawing another layer and extending out the reach of that layer every time, and that way it can kind of give the feel of a smooth gradient but still be made up of like solid patches of color. Although, as you can see, if you were fast enough, I added a layer effect, the angled strokes effect, so that it would, I don't know, almost look like it was done in marker. I don't know. And then over here I'm adding a blurred layer on top of it as almost sort of a bit of a bloom to make it kind of glow. And now I'm just fixing little tiny details, like I accidentally colored that part skin color when it should have been green, and just a little smudge on the eye. And with that, I mean, the only issue is that it's a bit too dark, so I'll just add this white layer, and there you have it. A finished piece created in a probably slower than necessary manner, and it looks like markers. Well, I had a lot of fun working on this and commenting over it, and I hope you had fun watching it. So, this is Spiffy, and I will catch you next time. Bye! If you like the music in this video, it was made by Fasol, who can be found by clicking the round thingy. And if you want to see more of my stuff, click on the rectangular thingies to see more of my videos. Thanks, and God bless.